Hey everybody, it's Alison Heikkila. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to do something that I am calling Faux Cyanotype. Cyanotype is a photographic printing process that produces blueprints using coated paper and light. I just got the definition off of Google, just so that you would know exactly what it is. It was discovered by Sir John Herschel in 1842, and he was an astronomer and a scientist. It's basically photography without a camera. So I have a couple of examples here of what actual cyanotype looks like. Inspiration comes from everywhere, and a huge inspiration for me over the past few years is BTS. And more importantly, RM, who is one of the members of BTS, came out with his new album called Indigo. And throughout the book that comes with the album are these beautiful ethereal cyanotype prints. So this is one of them. The cover, you could just see how soft and beautiful it is. I thought I'd show you what some actual cyanotypes look like so you can get an idea of what kind of look we're going for. Isn't that beautiful? You can get really detailed imagery depending on how close your objects, in this case there's wildflowers and seeds, are to the paper that you're using and how much sun there is and how long you let things have exposure for. I actually have done cyanotype in the past. It was a very long time ago, but it's a really cool process. I have a kit actually that I need to pull out because I really want to do some of these prints for myself, but I thought it would be fun to just do a faux version. Isn't that cool? You could see a hand here. Isn't that neat? This is just fabric. So what's interesting is I was really inspired by the artwork, and then a Colorful Life Designs came out with this month these stencils that are perfect for cyanotype. So this one is called Trailing Vines, and I have an example with this stencil that I'm going to show you. This one is called Spring Foliage, and it's a nice huge 6x9 stencil, and it's just perfect for this technique and this look. And this third one is called Wildflowers. And incidentally, one of the songs on the Indigo album is called Wildflowers. So this is very appropriate, not only for the cyanotype print that I'm going to be making with you today, but also for the album that inspired this in the first place. And this is the card. We're going to use one of the other two stencils, but isn't that cool? And it looks like cyanotype. And all you really need is prize ribbon distressing. It's a great technique. I hope that you'll give it a try. So how about I show you how it's done? The first thing that we're going to do, now that I've chosen the Wildflowers stencil, is spray the back of the stencil with some pixie spray. This will give the stencil a light tack so that it will help the stencil to stay in place while we use the prize ribbon distress ink on top to ink blend. So right now I'm just placing it exactly where I want it to go, and I've grabbed my distress ink, and now we're just going to do some very simple ink blending. You can go pretty heavy with this technique if you don't want to use a brush and you'd rather use like a sponge that sometimes gives a heavier application, like the mini ink blending tools. You can totally do that. I decided to just go with the brush because I have them on my desk and it was just there. But you can definitely use whatever ink blending type of tool, whether it's a brush or a sponge, for this technique. I think that going a little heavier is probably better than going light, but it's also okay to have variation in tones. Some areas can be a little darker, some areas can be a little bit lighter. If you think back to the book that I had shown you from RM's Indigo, you can see that the shades of blue are not exactly the same throughout any of the prints. There's variations in it. And that just has to do with how the sun is exposed to those prints. So now that that's finished, you can definitely save that ink that's on the stencil. You can see that I showed a bottle of water there. You can spray it with some water and then apply it to another piece of cardstock. So don't waste that ink. I actually wound up doing this off camera later on. You can definitely get another print out of it. So now what we're going to do is you can choose to use water for this faux cyanotype technique, but I decided to go with some shimmer. So I have Sheer Shimmer Spritz in Frost from Imagine/Tsukineko, and I sprayed it generously. Now I have the ink sprayer tool. You can use the one that is currently available from Ranger, the big blower tool that you use for alcohol ink. This is just one that was also from Ranger that was originally designed to use with a marker, like the distress markers. But just push some of that air around, or use the air to push some of the ink around, and the Sheer Shimmer Spritz, so that this way it kind of blurs those lines. Cyanotype has a lot of blurry lines and imagery. Not everything is perfect. So, you want to try to get that effect. Otherwise, it's just basic stenciling, right? So here what I'm doing is I'm picking up some of the extra Sheer Shimmer Spritz that is around the card there, and I'm just blurring some of those lines. No real rhyme or reason to it. I just want to move that ink around and blur some of those edges so that it looks more ethereal and more like a true cyanotype. I'll be picking up some of the excess that I have here. It's just a little too much. It's blurring a little bit too heavy. It's got some pools of color that I don't really want. So I'm just using a paper towel to pick that up. And I just continue to, refine what I'm doing, or really blur. If I was refining, I would be cleaning up. And in this case, I'm not cleaning up. I'm kind of blurring those edges. And I think that this is just a fun way to kind of use your stencils differently. So I used my embossing tool to just kind of dry it off, and you could see that shine there. It's really pretty. And now I have a die from Erin Lee Creative. It says Magical. And I grabbed the abstract elements from Tim Holtz and Sizzix. This is like my new favorite die to use for sentiment strips because it's just different. It's got those little holes in it. I think it looks really cool. And I used the tiny text stamp from Simon, and I applied just a simple "your" so that it can go with the magical. And I stamped it with the Prize Ribbon Distress ink just so that it all coordinates nicely. And I'm just applying it to the top of the card there because there's a nice space. And part of the area at the top of that fern there, it blurred out a little too much. I don't really love it. So I think that putting the magical right on top of that will help kind of mask that a little bit. I'm just using some Barely Arts glue here so that I can apply my magical, and then I'll do the same to the your. And on my desk there, you can see I have that little white speck is actually a star. So I'm just going to get that on there to dot the eye. I think that using that abstract element as a sentiment strip is really fun. I'm using it a number of times already. You may have seen it a couple of times on my blog already, but I think it's just fun. It's different. So now I'm going to just apply this to my card base, and I'm keeping it white. I don't really keep them white too often, but I think in this case it looks good. I don't want to take away from this technique that we just worked on. I think it's really pretty. And you'll get a totally different look if you don't add the shimmer. So definitely give it a shot and let me know what you think of it. So there are the two versions, and I'm sure I'll be using the third stencil at some point to make an additional version. So I appreciate you stopping by and hanging out with me today. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you very soon. Stay safe, be well, peace out.